can do about it, so she wanders downstairs. Margaretta says, "If you can't pry Clara out of her room, then take Ruth out for some exercise. Your sister the ox is banging into things again, which means she's not stretching her limbs as she ought." They wander up and down the streets. Harlem is becoming an easy place in which to feel at home. In the street next to St. Bavo's, women hustle baskets of cloth on their backs. Men trundle wheelbarrows with kegs of ale. The window shutters, which drop down during the day, serve as ledges for the display of wares. Iris and Ruth inspect the goods, a pastime that costs nothing and annoys the shopkeepers. But if the Dutch find Ruth as grotesque as the English did, they keep it to themselves. Only a few children run after her and taunt her. There is always St. Bavo's to slip into if the hubbub of the streets gets too frantic for Ruth. Iris doesn't have strong feelings about churches one way or the other, but she remembers what the master has told her about St. Bavo's. Built as a Catholic cathedral, it's now in the hands of the Protestants. In foul weather it serves as a kind of indoor public park, where men and women and dogs go to shake off the wet. People stroll for exercise, conversation, and to view the decorations set against whitewashed walls. Iris listens to everything. She imagines bringing Clara here one day and saying all this in English to her. Look, the coloured glass windows on the church's west wall, and how one panel of it was removed because it celebrated too gloriously some Catholic bishop of long ago. The slabs in the floor to remember the dead. The lozenges mounted on pillars to remember the dead. The dead, always with us. There's no memorial to her father, of course. Not here or anywhere. There weren't even prayers mumbled in his memory. To notice something else quickly. She can't help but notice, having listened to the master all these weeks, there's very little in the way of religious painting. Not a crucifixion in sight. Not a virgin as far as you can see. Not even in the most shadowy corners. No wonder the master feels so useless. For a moment Iris imagines how he must suffer, for she's feeling useless too, wandering about a church instead of performing the task for which she and her mother and sister are being given food and lodging. Ruth knows nothing of the gospel story, so far as Iris can tell. Her attention, such as it is caught by things seen rather than by things heard. "Look," says Iris suddenly, "the Queen of the Hairy-Chinned Gypsies." It's that palsied old woman with the sticks, the Spider-Woman poking along in the shadow of the apse. But when they draw closer, she's gone. Slipped out a side door, or scurried in spider form up a pillar of St. Bavo's, where she crouches, drinking in the news of people's murmured secrets. Iris isn't accustomed to befriending children her own age. Having Ruth in the family has always meant that other children kept their distance. But maybe Iris can entice Clara with the appeal of the supernatural, especially if Clara is a supernatural child, a replacement creature left behind by thwarties when they stole the real Clara baby away. The next day, Iris pitches her voice to carry up the stairs, and she calls out, "Ruth, do you remember yesterday when we saw the queen of the hairy-chinned gypsies, and how she changed herself into a spider and fled from us?" It takes only a minute to work. Clara appears at the head of the stairs. Iris glances into the upper hall, which in its walnut panelling seems even at noon nearly dusky. She's amazed and a little frightened. Clara is almost like a ghost, a lambent thing with one hand out against the wall, a shimmeringness in the gloom, like a candle in a midnight forest. She is stunning to look at, with her immaculate skin and her dried wheat hair. She comes forward. Her eyes are hooded and sulky, and her lower lip protrudes in a way that can only mean trouble. "Come down. Some milk and bread and a little honeyed fruit. It's time to meet this Iris," says Henrika, calmly through the open door of her private office. At her table in grey mid-morning light, she hunches working over a ledger book, an inky quill in one hand, rapid counting on the fingertips of the other. "Ruth, the old queen had legs like a spider's, but they were as huge as the hoop of a wagon wheel, weren't they?" says Iris. Clara ventures down the stairs close to the wall, but even behaving skittishly, she moves with poise. "Have your breakfast. We're going out when you're dressed," Iris says to Clara, with a nonchalant bossiness she doesn't quite feel. Clara slips into a chair and grabs some bread. Her father smiles and nods at her. "Oh, Iris, but you won't go out," calls Henrika from her work table. Her fingers are stained with ink, and she curses in a manner acceptable for well-bred goodwives. "I want to take her to St. Bavo's," says Iris. "We might be able to find the queen of the hairy-chinned gypsies, or the dwarf with the arms of an ape." "Clara doesn't go out," says Henrika. "Well, in the walled garden, for some air, of course." Now she appears at the doorway, fixing Iris with a stern look. She hasn't been away from home for 3 years. Not since a housemaid once shared some gossip. A changeling child had been born to a glass-blower's daughter. Clara so pestered me to go look at it. I was worn down at last, and covering her with hood and cloak, I agreed to take her there and back again. "A changeling," says Iris. How can Henrika say such a thing so openly? By the time we got there, the thing had died, and crows had borne its body away. "Oh," says Iris. "Maybe Henrika doesn't know the gossip about her daughter Clara. What did the crows do with the changeling's body?" "Dropped it in the Harlemsmere, where all children without souls swim until the Judgment Day." "But I hear they would like to drain the Harlemsmere," says Margaretta, bringing cheese from the kitchen and placing it where Clara can reach it. "What will happen to all the drowned, soulless babies then?" "I suspect they will be channeled out to sea," says Henrika calmly. "I don't really know. I have my mind on my figures." "We could go look for a changeling, I suppose," says Iris craftily, peering at Clara to see if any interest is piqued. Clara looks curious, but wary. But Henrika holds out her quill like a finger, wagging it at Iris. "This is entirely forbidden. You may go out into the garden or into any room of the house if you knock at the door first, but you may not bring Clara out the front door or out the side gate. Nor may you climb like an urchin over any wall or drop out of any window. You may not slither up the chimney, nor burrow through the cellars. Do you understand me?" "We're prisoners," says Iris. Clara isn't fit for the world. She trembles so and breaks into chills. Visit the garden and the sheds beyond. Clara knows where she's permitted to go. Up until now, Vandermeer has been bathing his face in the steam from his bourne coffee, which combines the smells of the warmed beer, sugar, and nutmeg with the mattressy odour of his beard. But he tilts his chin parallel to the table and says, as if the next instalment in an ongoing argument, "Do you remember hearing that in Delft the clergy banned gingerbread men at the feast of Sinterklaas? And the children rebelled? They ran, shrieking, through the streets and wouldn't do their tasks. Children will rebel eventually, my dear." Henrika settles her hands at her side and lowers her eyes. In an apologetic tone, addressing the tabletop, she replies, "I am speaking to Iris. I am not speaking to you." Vandermeer nods affably and says no more, but Iris sees the truth in Margaretta's observation. Although Henrika wears a guise of pretty deference, she acquiesces to no one, least of all her husband. When Clara, who has appeared to pay little attention to this, finishes nibbling, Iris says, "I'll get my sister, and we'll go outside into the garden. We'll wait for you there. Come out when you've dressed." Iris finds Ruth. Iris hates using her sister like this, but huge Ruth may be a more likely attraction than Iris. After all, it was Margaretta's tussle with Ruth that caused Clara to lean out the window and scrutinize the ox girl. Perhaps being disappointed in never seeing a changeling baby, Clara had seen the howling older fisher girl as the next best thing, a grotesque.